God be the glory, great things he hath done. So loved he the world that he gave us his Son, who yielded his life and atonement for sin, and opened the life gate that all may go in. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, let the earth hear his voice. Praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give him the glory, great things he hath done. Oh, perfect redemption, the purchase of blood, to every believer, the promise of God. The violence offenders who truly obey, that moment may enter the heavenly way. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, let the earth hear his voice. Praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give him the glory, great things he hath done. Great things he hath taught us, great things he hath done, and great our rejoicing through Jesus the Son. Purer and higher and greater will be our wonder, our transport, when Jesus we see. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, let the earth hear his voice. Praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give him the glory, great things he hath done. Tom, you want to have open prayer?
Our Heavenly Father, we're so glad to be here this morning amongst all of our brothers and sisters. Father, we ask you to let us get something out of this lesson that we get this morning. Father, we pray for the men and women in the military. We pray that you'll help them come home and be safe. Father, we pray for all the little children. Father, we pray for the missionaries overseas. And most of all, Lord, we pray for the churches throughout the world. Forgive us of our sins. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Turn to 43. 43. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine, heir of salvation, purchase of God, born of his Spirit, washed in his blood. This is my story. This burst on our side, angels descending, rain from above, echoes of mercy, whispers of love. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. Perfect submission, all is at rest. I in my Savior am happy and blessed, watching and waiting, looking above, filled with His goodness, lost in His love. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long.
Youngest preacher in the house is ready.
Good morning. Good morning. It's a blessing we can be here this morning. I know it's kind of rainy and dreary outside, but it's great that everybody can make it out anyway. And I'm excited about this morning's lesson because we're coming to a critical part in Jacob's life. You may ask, well, what part in Jacob's life wasn't critical? But throughout Genesis, as we've been studying together, we have seen the peaks of certain individuals in this account and their role in what took place. And as one person reached their peak, they would then start going down, and the next person would start to rise up as the center of the story and the main character on the stage, you might say. And that's what's happening with Jacob here. He's been through a long journey with God. He's had to undergo a lot of suffering, as well as causing quite a bit himself. And throughout all of this, his relationship with God has grown. And now up to this point, we're going to see him kind of reach his peak with God. Last week, we talked in detail about the angel wrestling with God, the angel wrestling with Jacob, or Jacob wrestling with God there, and the ideas around that. We talked in detail about angels themselves and how they have been manifest in times past and after this, in relationship as a God's messenger, and sometimes also how they seem to have a special relationship there as well, and how there seems to be something that is more. And that was our conversation last week, the end of chapter 32 in Genesis. And this week we're moving on into Jacob and Esau finally meeting each other. You may remember from the week before last, and a little bit we talked about last week, that Jacob's coming home. He went away for a while after deceiving his father, who was nearly dead, into getting his birthright and blessing of his brother, his older brother. And he deceived his father. He took advantage of Esau at one point, and Esau wasn't very happy with Jacob. In fact, he had plans to kill him after their father had died and the time of mourning had passed. So his mother came out with the idea of sending him away to her brother's house. And there he could find a wife for himself as well. So Jacob went away, and he went to live with Laban, his mother's brother, his uncle. And at that time, he received Leah and Rachel for time working there. We talked in detail about the story of Jacob and Laban and all the dealings that happened there, some of them not so good of dealings, his wages being changed 10 times, as Jacob put it. And now he has left Laban, and he's on his way home. And he's afraid. What is Jacob afraid of?
His brother.
His brother. He's afraid of Esau. Why would he have to be afraid of Esau?
Because he threatened to kill him.
Because he threatened to kill him. That's what we were just talking about. He threatened to kill him. He was mad at him. He'd gotten a blessing. He got my birthright. He deceived my father, and then he ran away. Jacob's not excited at all about seeing his brother again. He divided all of his company into 2 camps, hoping that maybe if Esau gets one and destroys them, the other one might escape. Things don't look very good for Jacob. And as he's coming back, he sends all of his family on across the river. And that's when he wrestles with God. And now, chapter 33, we're going to see Jacob come face to face with Esau. Read with me here, beginning verse 1. And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the 2 female servants. And he put the servants with their children in front, then Leah with her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all. He himself went on before them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. But Esau ran to meet him, and embraced him, and fell on his neck, and kissed him, and they wept. Well, the beginning of this didn't sound very good, did it? Jacob looks up, and what does he see? Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. This doesn't look very good at all. So Jacob divides up his children, puts his favorite wife, the wife he originally intended to have, and his only son by her in the very back, and he goes on ahead. 7 times he stopped and bowed to him. He was trying to show Esau, I'm your servant. He'd already sent envoys ahead with gifts. He's been trying to bribe Esau. He's been trying to make him happy in any way that he could. And what does Esau do? He runs to him, hugs him, kisses him, and they start weeping together. This is a twist you couldn't have guessed of. This is not what you would expect to happen. This isn't what Jacob expected. It isn't what anybody in the family expected. Now look in verse 5. And when Esau lifted up his eyes and saw the women and the children, he said, Who are these with you? Jacob said, The children whom God has graciously given your servant. Then the servants drew near, they and their children, and bowed down. Leah likewise and her children drew near and bowed down. And last, Joseph and Rachel drew near, and they bowed down. Esau said, What do you mean by all this company that I met? Jacob answered, To find favor in the sight of my Lord. But Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself. Jacob said, No, please. If I have found favor in your sight, then accept my present from my hand. For I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God, and you have accepted me. Please accept my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. Thus he urged him, and he took it. Then Esau said, Let us journey on our way, and I will go ahead of you. But Jacob said to him, My Lord knows that the children are frail, and that the nursing flocks and herds are a care to me. If they are driven hard for one day, all the flocks will die. Let my Lord pass on ahead of his servant, and I will lead on slowly at the pace of the livestock that are ahead of me, and the pace of the children, until I come to my Lord in Seir. So Esau said, Let me leave with you some of the people who are with me. But he said, What need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. But Jacob journeyed to Succoth, and built himself a house, and made booths for his livestock. Therefore the name of that place is called Succoth. Now Succoth means booths. And Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan. On his way from Padan Aram, he camped before the city. And from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, he bought for 100 pieces of money the piece of land on which he had pitched his tent. There he erected an altar and called it El Elohe Israel. So a lot has taken place in chapter 33. He saw his brother, and Esau was not anything like what he expected. He expected Esau to be angry. He expected Esau to want him dead. And Esau said, What do you mean by sending all these gifts on ahead? Take them back. I don't need them. I've got plenty. Eventually, Jacob presses upon him and gets him to take him, and he accepts him. But this is a meeting that he was not expecting, at least for it not to go in this way. Jacob was so happy that he saw his brother Esau, and that Esau accepted him, and that Esau was not angry at him. So much so that he said, it's like seeing the face of God. It's such a great thing to get to see your face and for you to be happy to see me. Esau said, come with me, let me journey back with you. Jacob decided that he was going to take the long way and go slower. That way he could not have to press the livestock and his children so much. He could go ahead and get his house affairs in order, and then he would come see his brother. Now what's interesting that has happened now is we're going to see a little side story take off. We're going to talk a little bit about Dinah. But before we get into that, I wanted us to think a little bit harder about this idea of sacrifice. We see that at the end of chapter 33 that Jacob built an altar. Throughout all of Genesis, you'll see this common theme. People sacrificing for God. People giving up things. People worshiping, giving up their livestock. Even Abraham giving up his own son. It's hard for us to really understand what sacrifice is. In fact, we might even suggest that we have no true idea of what sacrifice is. There's a video I want us to watch. It's a short illustration of a young girl's definition of sacrifice. I would dare say that throughout our lives, there's not much that we have went without that we wanted or that we needed. Throughout most of our lives, we find the majority of our needs met, and we find ourselves pretty happy. But that's not quite the case for everyone and for every situation. For some, there are things that have to be done without and hard decisions that have to be made. Bear with me for a second. This is going to be really loud. We made it. Nobody's hurt. This is a really short video, but it is something that liable to bring tears to your eyes. So if you have a crying towel, you might want to have it ready.
Like it's a standard blood transfusion. We're going to take about 2 units from your daughter. We're going to put them into your son. I think it's going to give him a fighting chance. We're hoping it's going to jumpstart his immune system. Shape antibodies, give us signs. We have great results doing this. Okay? You have any questions? All right, thanks, God.
Sweetie, you ready? Okay, this is going to sting just a little bit. How long till I die? Oh,
We don't often understand what sacrifice really is. That little girl, first time I saw that video, she taught me pretty well what it really means to be willing to sacrifice something. I can't imagine what that would feel like. I can't imagine how hard it would have to be willing to give up something you hold very precious and very dear for something that is a better cause, for something that is more high or more noble. They lived this life. What about Jacob when he was going on and he divided his camp so that the two camps of his children would have a chance, knowing that if one camp of his children got overtaken and was killed by Esau, that the other would survive? Can you imagine having to make that decision? Where he layered out his family into different groups, where first his servants with their kids would come first, and then his less favored wife, and then his more favored wife, and him going on before all of them. How that would have felt. I mean, how are you supposed to escape this large company of people that he had coming? 400 men with Esau. That's just Jacob and Esau. That's just one example of one time. Sacrifice is not a sacrifice if you don't lose anything.
Jacob, I don't know if everyone understood the video or not. You need to explain something about it.
That's a good point. Thank you. In this video, what was a simple blood transfusion, the little girl didn't seem to understand. She evidently thought they were taking all of her blood, and that's what they needed. As they started taking out her blood to get to her little brother, she said, "How long until I die? How long until my life lets him live?" That's when the parents and the nurse explained that they were just needing a little bit. But she was going into that with full expectation of giving her life so their brother would have a chance. I don't know about y'all, that's a tearjerker for me, one of the harder ones for me to watch. Sacrifice is giving something. Being willing to do all. Now, all of us may not be in situations ever that require us to give our life. May never be in a situation that requires for you to offer up your own children or your own family or your own self. We may never have the opportunity, and I say it like that on purpose. I may never get the blessing to be able to make as great a sacrifice as someone else. Well, why would you say that, Jacob? You don't ever want to have to be in that situation. That's true. I don't want to ever have to be in the situation to make that decision. But having gone through something like that, that'd be a good test of faith, wouldn't it? What are you really willing to give up? We like to sugarcoat things. It's simple. It's simple to be a Christian. All you got to do is go to church and stop doing bad things that everybody knows you have to do already. And it's not that big of a deal. That's what we like to present to people, because then more people want to get involved. They want to be a part of that. It's not that simple. It's dying. Putting to death yourself so that you can be someone else. A servant. Someone willing to give their life at a moment's notice for the cause of Christ. Someone that's willing to sacrifice everything here because they know that there's something else better coming. This idea goes really well with our Wednesday night class we're currently doing in Hebrews. We're just making it to Hebrews chapter 11, where you get that chapter full of the heroes of faith and all the different things that they gave up and all the different trials they went through. Why? Because they had something to look forward to. They had a home to look up to. And it was because of that that they made those sacrifices. We entertained the idea some last week, I believe it was, of why would we make sacrifices if we didn't have hope? Why would we make sacrifices if there was nothing to look forward to? What would be your reason? Well, there wouldn't be. Why was it worth Jacob risking going back to where his father's house was, the land of Canaan, if he was going to have to meet up with Esau? God told him to. Well, what does that matter? God told him to. He knew that if he wanted to be in fellowship with God, he had to do what God says. And being in fellowship with God and having that relationship with Him was more important than anything else. Having that relationship with God was more important than anything else to him in his life. His children, his own life, his family, his well-being. He was willing to be Esau's servant if that's what it required. In chapter 34, we're going to see kind of a reverse reaction here. With the defiling of Dinah, something horrible happens to one of Jacob's daughters. In verse 1, now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the women of the land. She goes out venturing to, it seems, find some friends. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he seized her and lay with her and humiliated her. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. Well, what's happened here? What started out as a base fleshly attraction, and you might even go further than that, because he did not just seize her. He did not just lay with her, but he humiliated her. There seems to be quite a lot more bearing on what happened here. We're not told exactly what it was, and I don't know that we want to know. But it wasn't something good. And afterwards, he developed a love for her, some feelings for her, and he decided he wanted to make things right for whatever reason. Whether it be more desire or whatever, we're not told. But he loved her and he spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this girl for my wife." Now Jacob heard that he had defiled his daughter Dinah, but his sons were with his livestock in the field. So Jacob held his peace until they came. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. The sons of Jacob had come in from the field, and as soon as they heard of it, the men were indignant and very angry, because he had done an outrageous thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter. For such a thing must not be done. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, "The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to me to be his wife." A couple of things here. Jacob hears what's happened, and he's upset because his daughter's been defiled. Because out of wedlock, this man took her, seized her, and made her lay with him. This was something that was not to be done. This was something that was seen as outrageous. When the brothers came in, they were mad. They were angry. Because this shouldn't happen. This was too far. Stolen some of their livestock, stolen a well, that's one thing. But they had done something here that crossed the line. Then Hamor, the father of this man who had defiled their daughter or their sister, came to him and asked to have him as a wife. Let's see what happens. Verse 9, "Make marriages with us, give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourself. You shall dwell with us, and the land shall be open to you. Dwell and trade in it, and get property in it." Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, "Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me, I will give. Ask for me a great bride price and gift as you will, and I will give you whatever you say to me. Only give me the young woman to be my wife." The sons of Jacob answered Shechem and his father Hamor deceitfully, because he had defiled their sister Dinah. They said to him, "We cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us. Only on this condition will we agree with you, that you become as we are by every male among you being circumcised. Then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to ourselves, and we will dwell with you and become one people. But if you will not listen to us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and we will be gone." Their words pleased Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem, and the young men did not delay but to do the thing, because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. Now he was the most honored of all his father's house. So Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city and spoke to the men of the city, saying, "These men are at peace with us. Let them dwell in the land and trade in it. For behold, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters as wives, let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will the men agree to dwell with us and become one people, when every male among us is circumcised, as they are circumcised. Will not their livestock, their property, and all their beasts be ours? Only let us agree with them, and they will dwell with us." And all who went out of the gate of his city listened to Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male was circumcised, and all who went out of the gate of his city. On the third day, when they were sore, two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and came against the city while it felt secure, and killed all the males. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city, because they had defiled their sister. They took their flocks and their herds and their donkeys, and whatever was in the city and in the field. All their wealth all their little ones and all their wives and all that was in their houses they captured and plundered. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land. The Canaanites and the Perizzites, my numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household." But they said, "Should he treat our sister like a prostitute?" Now there's a lot that goes on here in chapter 34. Dinah, one of Jacob's daughters, was defiled, and the man kept her. Didn't just defile her and lay with her, he kept her and wanted her to be his wife. Then he goes back to Jacob and Jacob's sons and says, "I want her. Tell me what the price is and I'll pay it. Anything at all and I'll do it." And deceitfully, the sons of Jacob answered, "Well, you have to be circumcised like we are, and then you can have her." So they go back and they convince every man in that city to be circumcised. They seem to give the reason that if they dwell in the land with us, eventually what they have will be ours. So we'll assimilate all their wealth and all that they have. And every man in the city was circumcised. Now, just to draw a line in the sand here for a minute, how much influence do you think that these two individuals had on the people in that city?
Quite a bit,
Sounds like he had quite a bit of influence. Very important people. In fact, that's what the text said. They were very important people in the city. All the men agreed to do this. And then when they felt like they were secure, on the third day when they were unable to move from pain, two of the brothers, Simeon and Levi, came in and killed all the men in the city.
They must have had some help with all of that.
Well, that's the idea that a lot have, that there must have been others with there, but think about it here. Every man in the city is in dire pain. Well, they got some anesthesia, didn't they? No. Do you know how the circumcisions were done? Not with a scalpel, with a piece of flint, a very sharp rock. And it wasn't by trained surgeons. And it was done usually while someone was a child. So they would have plenty of time to recover. And also because they're young, they can't really fight back and all of that. And additionally, that's when the blood clotting starts. So there were always going together reasons for why it was done at that time. But for someone that was an adult, it's quite a different process. And it has quite a different effect. And it says Simeon and Levi. Simeon being one of the oldest of the sons, as well as Levi being another one of the oldest of the sons, taking care of the business. And then the rest of the brothers come in and help loot and plunder. Now, there are a lot of people that speculate as to whether what was done here by the sons of Jacob was right or not. Well, they were deceitful. First off, we need to draw a peg in the sand. Deceit in war, or in any game that is played, any type of challenge is understood. What do I mean by that? When you play football, you expect someone to do a bootleg, turn around and go the other way, fake it. That's expected. So is it wrong for someone who is playing in a football game to fake passing it and run? No. It's understood by everybody coming to the table that you got to watch out because they might pull a trick play. What about in war? When you flank somebody, what's that? You sneak off, come around behind them. In fact, this is a tactic that Israel and God employed when conquering Canaan, specifically at Ai. When they came and attacked towards Ai, they drew back and made people of Ai think they were retreating. And people of Ai came out after them. And the rest of Israel came into the city behind them, burnt the city down, killed everyone, and then came out and helped finish the job. It was deceit. So, was this wrong? Well, there's a lot of confrontation on both sides, people that feel either way about it. On one hand, you have the horrible thing that was done to Dinah. And what was the punishment for that? Death. That was the punishment. So people say, well, the whole city didn't have to be destroyed. They didn't have to kill everyone. And then the other side would come back and say, well, what were they planning on doing? Why were all of these men circumcised? The men stood at the gate of the city and said, we'll get their stuff. How are they going to get their stuff? There was some ill will planned towards them. So you have both sides of that. And, neither one of them seem to be clearly indicated as to God's blessing or condemnation on what's done here. It just is a side route that tells us a little more about the city. We do see that Jacob wasn't very happy with what happened. He didn't say because they didn't deserve it. He said because you've made me smell bad to all the people around here. That means all the people in Canaan have heard that what you did. They heard how this deceitful thing was done and that you wiped out a city. The rest of the people wouldn't be very happy. In fact, what happens next, when Jacob is moving, it says that the fear of God was on the other people around him, so they didn't pursue him. It insinuates they wanted to pursue him.
Well, don't you think some of that happened because God did not want them to mingle with that group?
That is another interesting part of this, is the people of Israel mingling with the people of the land. And God did not desire for them to mingle with the people of the land. One of the problems is because of what happens next. They have to put away their idols before Jacob's name is officially changed to Israel. Before God officially says your name's now Israel, they has to put away all of his foreign idols. Well, why does he have foreign idols? Why does he have them in the first place? Isn't that bad? Why does his wife, his favorite wife, steal the idols from her father's house, Laban's house? Where have they picked up all these others along the way? Perhaps it's from times when different people like Dinah went out and wanted to see the women of the land and associate and go in with. One of the problems that Israel had when they came back from Egypt and were dwelling in the land is they started taking wives from the people of the land. And when they were taking wives from the people of the land and mingling in with the people of the land, they were taking on their gods and their religious customs too, which is a common thing to happen.
Was it a way of cleansing his lineage that Christ was going to come from?
I don't see so much that this was a God intervening. It is recorded, which not everything that happens in Jacob's life is recorded. We just have snippets here and there of the big important things. So the fact that it is recorded tells us a little bit. But at this point, God isn't so much cleansing the land. When he comes back from Egypt, that's when we'll see the cleansing of the land. And it seems to be because, as God told Abraham, the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. And it would not be full until they would come back from Egypt. So that may be a part of it. But the fact that it is included here does speak to something. And it does speak something to how Jacob felt as well. Did you notice that while his sons were out in the field, it didn't say that Jacob sat around smiling with a happy attitude. It said he contained himself. He subdued himself until his sons came in. He was angry. He was upset. He wanted something to be done.
But I don't think God expects us to keep peace at any expense.
God expects us to do what's available on our part to take care of our families. Now, as far as the keeping peace at any expense, there are certain boundaries we can't cross because it would be defiling ourselves. For example, you may have heard all these stories about being in war-torn countries where the majority of the religion is something else, and police coming into rooms and throwing the Bible on the floor where Christians are studying and say, spit on this Bible or we're going to shoot you right here and right now. There's numerous variations of the same kind of story. And all these people end up spitting on the Bible and walking out and get to keep their lives, except for the one or two who won't. Now, does God require us at that moment to stand up? Everything I read in this Bible tells me He does. What about my family at home? Who's going to take care of them? I have to be there to provide for my family. I believe in protection. I believe that God requires us to protect our family. That's one side of things. But then there's also another side. And there needs to be balance in between two of them. The other side is being willing to make sacrifices. Being willing to sacrifice anything for the cause of Christ. And as parents, God has given us the burden of protecting our families. In fact, we have the burden of protecting our fellow man and ensuring that justice is done. So we need to try to balance out, and that's a problem with balance, is that there's not a straight line And it'd be much nicer if the book was about this much thicker and it covered every possible plausibility and told us exactly what to do in each one. But anytime you have to use balance, then that insinuates that there's a little leniency on either side, especially from situation to situation. But we need to understand justice, which is a principle of God that He requires of us, and especially so of governments. Romans chapter 13 is very clear that the ruler of a nation does not bear the sword in vain. That sword insinuates a sword of the head, capital punishment. There's a reason for punishment. But on the other hand, there's mercy that God desires. So we have to find a balance there. Be clear. Let me be very, very clear. Vengeance is not justice. And perhaps vengeance is what motivated Jacob's sons more than justice. Any other comments or questions before we dismiss? All right. Thank you for your participation and your cooperation, and I hope it was helpful.